Our gospel today, we see Jesus Christ beginning his ministry. But like all things, they have to begin somewhere. He's walking along by the beach and he sees two men fishing. And he calls out to them and they come and follow him immediately. They leave everything that they have. He goes a little further and he sees two other men and he calls them and they also do the same. They leave as well. There is a sense of sacrifice to what these men did. What Peter and what John did and what Andrew did, that they were the ones who gave up everything to follow Christ. They walked away from their livelihoods to which they had to that end of giving everything to God. And in many ways, that's what happens to a priest. Many of us have a great sacrifice. The sacrifice that young men give for their priesthood is indeed a very heavy one. I had to leave everything I own. My family, my friends, my life, everything that I had, including the possibilities of having a family, knowing that I would never be able to have children of my own, and knowing that I would be away from my parents when they get ill, or my brothers or my sisters. But I gave that up for the purpose of preaching and teaching. In a very similar way, I'm like one of the apostles. I'm far from one of the apostles, but I'm like one of them. And that sacrifice has always weighed heavily upon us. Because our society and our world around us does not really uplift that particular decision in one's life. When I told my people at home in Ireland, that's been the idea in the pub, for instance, that I was going to become a priest, you should have heard some of the comments. And believe you me, they weren't nice. It wasn't a glorious idea of life. But yet at the same time, there was a few who thought it was a good idea. They said you make a better priest than a publican. Didn't know if that was true. But that's what they said. But when I come here to this country, I found that, the priesthood has an awful lot more. There was a whole lot more suffering to be got out of this lot than I ever thought would ever get in Ireland. The studies were extremely hard. Pressure to perform just like any other student. To take on a complete new life, new country, new people. To try to make friends with those people who I did not know. And as well as that, not only that, but making friends with guys who I knew I was going to have to leave again in order to come to Texas. Friendships were made and taken away. It's a small price to pay, though, for the work of Christ. You're going to hear quite a lot about discipleship over the next few months, or maybe even the next year. One of the themes that we are going to be trying to portray to you is that discipleship is not just the priest. That discipleship is part and parcel of the parish. It's not something that is only follow one priest and you can have no problem. Oh, I like Father Peter, so I go to Father Peter's Mass. I don't like Father John, I won't go to his Mass. That's not discipleship. That's the total opposite of discipleship. It's not the priest who makes the parish. The priest is the leader of the parish, yes, but he is not the one who makes the parish. The parish is made by those who live here. Some priests are lucky. They stay in a parish for 16 and 17 years. Some may be a little less lucky. Might get 3 or 4 or maybe 6 years in the parish. What happens if they like the priest and the next thing he leaves? And the next guy, they don't really like him so much. Well, the parish is torn at its seams. Division, strife, ununity. Those are the things that I have seen in many parishes. I'm not long a priest, but I have been in 4 different parishes. And I can safely say that there is none of these parishes that I've been in were following the idea of discipleship. They were tearing each other apart. The lack of unity was cruel. It was even so cruel that one of the priests who I was working with actually wanted to leave the priesthood. He said, how can I be a priest to such unwilling people? My answer was very clear, that you are a disciple of Christ. That's part of the suffering to which you have endured. The people didn't like him for some reason or other. He didn't deserve that kind of treatment. But the parish was tearing itself at the seams. We had to move the priest. It wasn't because the priest was at fault, by the way. It was because the parish were at fault. But when I look at this parish, I see that there is a sense of that particular problem too. There is a sense of disunity, a lack of discipleship. I'm here now in 12 months, or nearly 18 months here. And I've seen a great deal of work that has after been done and a lot of unity that has come together. But we are still far off being unified as a parish. That makes the priest's life a little harder, by the way. It also makes the parish life harder as well. It means that people don't give as they should give. It means that there is always some kind of strife going on between the groups of people to figure out who and what and where things are. There is no conformity between what needs to be done and why it should be done. Today's gospel is about that particular understanding. The understanding of discipleship. That sense of sacrifice that we have to give. But it means it's not just the priest having to give it or the bishop. It has to come also from the people. That sacrifice is sometimes not easy. We demand, or I won't say demand, we ask for you to help us with the parish and how to make it grow. And yet at the same time, when we want to do this kind of work, we find that very few people are willing to help. We're kind of like Little Red Hen syndrome in many ways. You want one to do it and you all follow. That's not the way your parish is going to survive. Your parish wants you to help it to grow. That's the sacrifice that you make. That sacrifice has also been involved not just in the giving of money, but also the giving of one's talents, one's time, to the teaching, the work that needs to be done, to the community, and to unity. One of the things that I see in this parish is that we seem to have two sides to our parish. That's going to have to change. That means buckling up and sometimes doing something you don't like doing. That's part and parcel of sacrifice. The apostles gave up everything they had to follow Jesus Christ. They did that for you. They didn't do it for themselves. Most priests who become priests do it for the same reason. Now, by the way, there's a few who don't do it for that reason. But most priests do it for that reason. I've seen priests broken because the parishes are not willing to yield. They don't want him to lead them. And the biggest problem is that we're sometimes afraid of change. Change is inevitable. We need to change. If we don't change, then we become stagnant. If we become stagnant, and you all know what happens to water that becomes stagnant, it becomes unusable. The same way with our church. You have that wonderfulness in your heart. I know it's there. I have seen it. I know that you have the grace. I know you have the will. And I also know that you sometimes just lack a little courage to get up, to move, and to give. That's all we ask. We're not asking you to change the world, but to change the world that you live in our little community. To bring our community together as one community. Not two different groups of people, but as one community, where we interact with each other. And if one is snacking, the other tries to pull them along. We show support to what is needed to build this parish. One of the programs that the diocese is doing is called Love Your Parish. It's a lovely sentiment. The question you would have to ask is, how are we loving our parish? We had a meeting the other night of the Pastoral Council and all the other committees. And very few people turned up. It was a very important meeting. But many people didn't turn up. Now I knew some of them weren't able. And then those people who weren't able had told me that they wouldn't have been there. So I knew they weren't coming. But where were the rest of them? It seems to be the same few all the time that are working. The rest of us seem to be sitting on the sideline. We're not really even cheering on the rest of the people. We're just sitting there, probably hoping that they'll make a mistake. And then we have something we can throw at them. Ah, you're doing it wrong. Instead of helping them to do it right. That's the part and parcel of sacrifice. That's the sacrifice that you give. To help and to work and to do the work that's needed to be done in the parish. So I ask you all today to think about discipleship. It's not just about being someone who is a spiritual person, but it's also something about one who is willing to open oneself to another, to be one with that person, to show through the understanding of God's love that you are a disciple of Christ, which has been given to you by your rite of baptism. You are the one who can only do that. I can't do it for you. I'd love to be able to do it for you. I'd love every word that I said was golden. And I'd love to say that every word I say, everybody listens. But I know they don't. And I don't expect them to. I'm not that good that I'd make change your mind by my words. I ask you to change your mind and your hearts by the words of God. By being a prayerful person. By being someone who is involved in spirituality as much as the hard work of what we have to do. We will not survive in this parish if we don't engage our lives in some sort of spiritual work. Even the work that we do. Because it's not done with a spiritual heart, it's going to fail. It has to have a spiritual background. The disciples found out that they needed God to do the work that had to be done. We need God to do the work that we have to do. And that means engaging in spirituality. And that'll mean, of course, that I'm going to be asking you to come to things that you don't want to come to. But open your minds. Come to them. Try to learn. If you don't learn your faith, how do you expect others to see what faith is? Oh, I'm too old now, Father. I've lived my life. That's not a good answer. You're never too old. One of my best friends, I suppose, or best theology that I have ever had was a man by the name of Monsignor Toro. He's 95 years of age. And he was driving from New York to Connecticut every day, about 200 miles every day, to teach us in the college at 95. That man taught me more in one semester than I've ever learned in college, 8 years. Because he lived his understanding of discipleship. When we spoke to him about spirituality, he would open our minds to the idea of prayer. He would open our minds to the idea of fellowship within prayer. That's a bit of a different story. We don't have that here. But the only way he says that you can actually do that is to learn your faith, is to re-engage in the learning of your faith, witnessing to it, witnessing it to others, and finding out how others do it, and learning from them, and combining that learning in a unity of fellowship, which is, of course, discipleship at the end of the day. So that's what I ask you to do. I ask you to try and pray to live the life of disciples. But in order for you to do that, you have to learn. You have to make that consciousness of changing your lives. If you don't do that, all the work that you're doing is not in vain. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen.